I live on a farm that was here before the road, before the asphalt, and certainly long before someone had the unfortunate idea of creating a fancy condominium on the other side of the fence. I wake up to the smell of wet earth, fresh milk and cow poo, and I wouldn't swap that for any French perfume. Life is really noisy here. There are chickens clucking at 5 a.m., pigs screaming like they've seen the devil, oxen mooing like they're rehearsing for an opera, and, of course, the tractor. That loud, glorious tractor that sings its metallic symphony at 7 a.m. sharp every single day. It's the sound of life working. But then she came along, the woman who decided that, instead of seeking peace on a mountaintop or silence in a Buddhist temple, it would be more interesting to live next to a working farm and demand that the world adapt to her sensitive ear. Seriously, she bought a house literally 200 meters from my chicken coop and then came to complain that the rooster sings too loudly. It's like someone moving to Venice and then getting angry because there's too much water. At first, I thought she was just a cool neighbor with insomnia. I ignored it. I carried on with life. The animals carried on doing what they always did. But then came the little notes. Ah, the little notes, left taped to the gate, written on pink paper in a handwriting that mixed passive-aggressive hatred with the handwriting of a kindergarten teacher. Things like, "Could you please find a quieter way to take care of the animals? Perhaps your roosters could learn to crow at a less invasive time?" The first time I read that, I nearly choked on my coffee. I smiled. I thought, what a phase. I tore it up and went to feed the pigs, but she didn't stop. She started filming the sounds of the farm. Seriously, the woman was filming the air. She climbed onto the balcony with a very expensive iPhone and stood there, looking like she'd smelled rotten onions, pointing her cell phone in the direction of the cows. Until then, it was a nuisance. But it became a crusade. She started attending meetings of the condominium association, because of course there is an association, and demanding that the noise from the farm be considered noise pollution. There was even a day when an inspector came by. An inspector, in the countryside, wearing moccasins, a dress shirt, and the look on his face of someone who had never cleaned chicken shit in his life. He left sweating and traumatized after a goat jumped on him. But the pinnacle came when she approached me personally, on a sunny morning, with a clear sky, and the oxen ruminating in peace. She showed up in a beige blazer, high heels sinking into the mud, and a printed spreadsheet in her hands. A spreadsheet with columns, timetables, decibel levels, pointing as if she were on the stock exchange, and with a voice that mixed condescension and threat. She said, "Did you know that I can file a lawsuit for disturbing the peace?" Disturbance. She used that word. On a farm. It was there that I understood that it wasn't just a matter of coolness. It was a mission. She wanted silence. Not peace, mind you. Silence. The kind of silence you get in a gated community, with high walls, trained dogs, and symmetrically pruned plants. Only she was in the wrong place. This isn't the setting for a margarine advertisement. There's real life here, with smells, screams, mess, and mud up to the knees. Of course, I thought about ignoring it. I could just move on. Let the woman waste paper with her complaints and live in my own world. But then I stopped, and I thought, why not embrace the spirit of the farm with even more enthusiasm? If the rooster's crowing bothers me, maybe he needs company. Something more theatrical. Something that honors the rural tradition and wakes up not only the residents of the condominium, but the sleeping souls of the entire city. That's when I had the idea. The most glorious, thunderous, metallic idea I've ever had. A bell, but not just any bell. Not a little country chapel bell. A giant bell. The kind that resonates all the way to the mountains, makes the earth tremble, and the birds change course. And so my new project began, the ultimate symbol of the countryside, the alarm clock of rural freedom, the terror of sensitive ears, and the official anthem of 6 a.m. I went after everything. I researched historic bells, old bell towers, metal factories that made bespoke pieces. I fell in love with a piece that had been used in an old railway station and was abandoned in a junkyard in the interior of Minas Gerais. It was perfect. It weighed over 400 kilograms and had a sound that seemed to come straight from the final judgment. When the crane arrived to install the piece on top of the barn, the look on the woman's face was a poem. She stood on the sidewalk, dumbfounded, with her sunglasses falling down her nose, holding her poodle's collar as if the poor dog was going to pass out from the sound that hadn't even started yet. The crane took almost 4 hours to position the bell on top of the barn. 4 hours of rumbling engines, creaking metal, sweating people, and the neighbor watching from her balcony as if it were a personal affront to the legacy of world peace. I, with my cap turned backwards, sipping my black coffee against the fence, just watched, and I confess, with an almost spiritual pleasure. It was like watching a Renaissance painting being painted live, every piece falling into place, every screw being tightened, the sun reflecting on the bronze of the bell as if God himself had approved my project. At the end of the afternoon, when everything was finally in place, it stood tall and imposing, shining like a trophy of rural resistance. I climbed up to the barn with my old wooden sledgehammer. I climbed slowly, step by step, feeling the wood creaking under my feet and my heart beating at a crazy pace, as if I knew something important was about to happen. I approached the bell, touched the cold metal with the back of my hand, and smiled. Because there, at that moment, I wasn't just a farmer. I was a symbol, a bastion against the spoiled urbanization that tries to turn everything into a gated community. But of course, I didn't play that day. That would have been too predictable. I left the bell there, quietly, a sleeping giant, just to make her sweat a little more. The poor woman spent the next few days in a mixture of paranoia and expectation. I could tell. I watched from the kitchen window as she went around the house, spied on the barn with binoculars, whispered with the neighbors as if she were reporting a nuclear threat. And to fuel her anxiety even more, I started doing some maintenance on the bell. I'd go up there every evening with a can of oil and a ladder just to tinker with it, turn a few screws, hit it lightly with a sledgehammer. A silent ritual of psychological torture. On the morning of the third day, she dared to approach me again, this time without a blazer. She had swapped the executive who doesn't know what is earth under her wedge outfit for something sportier, leggings, pristine white sneakers, and a pink thermos that looked more expensive than my entire tractor. She came with the same expression as always, half superior, half distressed, and asked me if the bell was functional. That's the word she used, functional, as if I'd put up a work of art just to show it off. I replied with the most sincere smile I could muster. I haven't figured it out yet. She frowned, took a step back, and walked away, muttering something that sounded like insane, mixed with process. That's when I realized she was afraid, not of the bell itself, but of what it represented. For her, the noise wasn't just a nuisance. It was disobedience, a constant reminder that the world doesn't revolve around her will, that not everything can be silenced with a protocol, a complaint, or a condominium meeting, and that, for people like her, is unbearable. I waited another 3 days. During that time, I spread the word around the town. I spoke to the baker, the letter carrier, the owner of the gas station, the girl in the little shop who always gives me cash on delivery. I told them that the bell was going to ring. What's more, it was going to ring every day, at 6 in the morning, on the dot, like a new rural time zone. Some laughed, others doubted, but everyone promised to pay attention. And then the day came. I woke up at 5:30. I showered, reinforced my coffee. I put on my best plaid shirt, and at 5:59, I went up to the barn. The sky was still a little purple, with that cold morning air that only the countryside knows. The chickens were already restless, the pigs stirring in the pigsty, the rooster doing his morning vocal warm-up. I approached the bell. I held the sledgehammer. I took a deep breath, and I hit it. The sound, my God, The sound. It wasn't a knock. It was an ancient metallic roar that seemed to awaken the very foundations of the earth. A deep, vibrant note that spread across the field like ceremonial thunder. Birds took flight. Oxen mooed in chorus. Chickens ran around in circles as if they had witnessed a miracle. And on the other side of the fence, swearing by all that is holy, the woman appeared on the porch with the expression of someone who had just heard the apocalypse. The bell rang for exactly 40 seconds. A long, glorious, thundering 40 seconds. And then silence. But not an ordinary silence. A respectful silence. As if even nature had stopped to absorb the moment. As if the universe had accepted that now, at 6 a.m., the farm had its own liturgy. I returned home satisfied. I opened the newspaper. I ate my bread and eggs in peace. The next day, I repeated the ritual, and the next, always at 6 o'clock sharp, with the same sledgehammer, the same firm step to the barn, the same well-timed blow. The routine became legend. People came from the city just to hear the bell. One 80-year-old man said that the sound reminded him of the church of his childhood. A child cried and then laughed. The dogs barked in the same rhythm. Even the rooster seems to have adjusted his crowing to come soon after. A kind of duet between tradition and resistance. As for the woman, well, she tried everything. She called the police again. She called a lawyer. She said that the bell had a psychological impact, that her dog developed noise anxiety. Her 14-year-old daughter could no longer sleep after 5:59 a.m., that the sound vibrated through the windows of the house like an emotional earthquake. But you see, I don't ring the bell at 3 in the morning, nor at 10 at night, nor at the times prohibited by law. I ring it at 6 a.m., business hours in the countryside, and so far, not even the judge has been able to refute this. The funniest thing is that after the first week of ringing the bell at 6 a.m., a lot of people started thanking me. I, who just wanted to do the sound justice and wake the lady up with class, ended up creating a kind of collective ritual. Neighbors who lived 2 or 3 kilometers away said they started waking up earlier. One told me that he started having coffee with his wife on the balcony, just to hear the ringtone and feel the day begin. One couple even named their new dog Tinkerbell after me. The irony is that those who most wanted silence ended up turning me into a rural tourist attraction. But of course, the protagonist of the noise outrage didn't find any of this pretty. Every morning when the bell rang, she took another step towards civilized insanity. She began to leave the house wearing huge DJ headphones, as if she were at a permanent electronic music festival. She crossed the garden with short, irritated steps, dodging watering cans and flowers as if even nature was mocking her. It was. The birds were singing louder. Even the wind seemed to carry more noise just to pass her window. And then, the new phase began, the legal offensive. I received an official notification, a letter-headed envelope with thick paper and expensive perfume, because, of course, even her lawyer needed to smell fresh. There it was, in formal words, the summary of the outbreak. Formal request for the interruption of high-intensity sound practice characterized by a metallic impact instrument at a time considered inappropriate for residential areas. The audacity, accusing me of impact sound practice, as if I were a satanic heavy metal band, and not a farmer with a bell. I took the paperwork to my own lawyer, who is also the owner of the funeral home and the town pastor. He read everything calmly, scratched his chin, and let out just one. "This is just chirping." I laughed, and I carried on ringing the bell. But the woman was insistent. When she saw that the process wasn't going to stick, she appealed. She started posting on social media. She made dramatic stories with the caption, "Nobody deserves to live like this," and the audio of the bell in the background. He filmed my house, the barn, even the cows. He said he was the victim of rural aggression. He used that term. He said that my obsession with noise was a form of violence. He managed, with a lot of effort and filtering, to gather a few supporters from the condominium, about 5. People who had never set foot in mud, but who shared the same dread of real-life sound. One morning, she went crazy. She came out of the house with a broom in her hand, barefoot, shouting unintelligible things while pointing at the bell. I was far away, feeding the pigs, but I could hear the litany. I hid behind the fence and watched in silence. She spun around in her own garden as if she were a sorceress cursed by the noise. She hit a garbage can with her broom, kicked the wooden bench, and ended the performance sitting on the grass, crying loudly, as if the world had conspired to destroy her peace of mind. And the most curious thing is that, at that point, I wasn't even ringing the bell out of revenge anymore. It was a custom, a ritual, part of my routine. If one day I stopped going up to the barn with the sledgehammer, I don't think the day would even start properly. My animals were already organized to the rhythm of the bell. They woke up with it, ate with it. The horses even seemed to raise their heads when it echoed. The sound spread through the fields like a natural alarm, a reminder that the farm was alive, but for her, it was war. Then came the petition. Yes, she printed out sheets of paper, went door to door around the condominium, forcing smiles and asking for solidarity against the rural racket. She got 17 signatures. 17. Most of them, curiously, from people who have never heard the bell because they live too far away. They signed just so as not to upset their crazy neighbor. But she treated the document as if it were an international peace treaty. She handed it to me personally, with that air of victory that only those who have never won anything know. I folded the paper carefully, thanked her, and put it in the drawer where I keep old electricity bills. And I rang the bell the next day, even harder. Of course, this kind of provocation, even if it's loud, has its consequences. I knew that one day she would try something more radical. And it didn't take long. One afternoon, I came home to find a car parked in the driveway. 2 policemen were sitting on the hood, drinking soft drinks. The older one smiled and said, "We've received another report of a disturbance." The other added, "But we just came to hear the bell. Can you ring it?" I laughed so hard I almost choked on my saliva. They stayed there for about 20 minutes, chatting, taking pictures of the bell and laughing at the whole story. One of them said that after the woman reported it, she became a laughingstock at the police station. They said it was the first time anyone had called 190 about a rural bell. What's more, it seems that the police officer who answered the call initially thought it was a hoax, but she didn't give up. The following week, I received an email from an environmental agency I didn't even know existed, asking me about possible acoustic impact on native bird species. The woman, amazingly, had opened a protocol claiming that the bell was affecting the sleep cycles of the birds. The little birds, the same ones that sing before sunrise, fly over electric trios at city festivals, and nest in building water tanks. That's when I realized that it had become a life mission for her. And honestly, I started to enjoy it. Not because I like fighting, but because there's something deeply liberating about seeing someone who lives surrounded by white walls, lavender air fresheners, and nature sounds playlists being forced to deal with real nature, the kind that stinks, makes noise, shits where it wants and doesn't obey voice commands. And in this scenario, the bell has become my ally, my spokesman, a metallic cry of rural freedom that no condominium siding can silence. I knew she wouldn't last long. The kind of people who go to war over a rooster or a bell rarely have the breath to fight outside the air conditioning. It's all foam, pose. They complain for sport, but can't sustain the theater when reality demands consistency. And that's exactly what happened. The woman gradually lost strength. Every morning, the bell rang as steadily as ever. The sound echoed across the fields, through the trees, across the hot asphalt, and hit the double-glazed windows of the condominium, reminding everyone that this was still a farm, not a decorating magazine showroom. She even tried to keep up appearances for a few more days. She left the house as if nothing was happening, pretended that the bell was invisible, that the sound didn't exist, that the world wasn't laughing at her crusade against rural life, but wear and tear appeared. The poodle, poor thing, started to walk with its head down, as if ashamed. Her plants, once all lined up with little names on wooden plaques, began to wilt. A cactus fell out of its pot. Coincidence or karma? I don't know. The truth is that even her house seemed to get sadder. The white paint became opaque. The grass lost its color. The porch became empty. The little notes stopped. So did the outbursts in front of the gate. The petition disappeared from the neighbors' mouths. And she shrank. She stopped shouting, stopped teasing, stopped existing in that energy of tired superiority. And that's when the final blow came. One morning, while it was still dark, I saw a removal truck stopped in front of her house. 2 men were taking out boxes, wrapped furniture, vases, and carpets. One of them was carrying the huge painting she made a point of displaying through the window. A hideous abstract painting she said she had bought at an auction in city. I stood at the edge of the fence, coffee mug in hand, watching in silence. Not out of spite, but out of justice. It was like watching the end of a bad soap opera that they insisted on keeping on the air for too long. She appeared last, dressed in black, with her hair up in a tight bun, and her usual sunglasses, even though it was 6 in the morning, and there wasn't a ray of sunshine in the sky. She walked to her car with firm steps, but without looking around. Not one last note, not one last threat. He got into the car, slammed the door, and drove off. Just like that. Like someone who realized, too late, that they were never in control of anything. And do you know what I did? I rang the bell. Not because I wanted to provoke him, but because it was 6 in the morning. Because my oxen were waiting. My chickens, too. And because the farm didn't stop to cry for anyone. The bell struck, metallic and glorious once again. And at that moment, I was sure that she heard it from inside the car, and that the sound echoed in her head for a long time after she turned the corner. After we left, everything went back to normal. The mornings went on noisily, full of roosters crowing, tractors choking, pigs squealing, and the good old bell greeting the dawn. The difference is that no one complains now. The new families who have arrived in the condominium seem to understand that this is no place for forced silence. It's countryside. It's the noise of life. It's genuine disorganization. Some have even started to take an interest. The other day, a man came by wanting to know where I bought the bell. He said he might install a smaller one in his yard. Have you thought about it? It'll become fashionable. The truth is that we get used to trying to please too much. We lower the volume of our lives so as not to disturb those who live in our bubble. And then, when you finally raise your voice, or your bell, you realize that it wasn't you who was exaggerating. It was the other person who was trying to erase what you are. I just wanted to look after my farm, wake up early, feed the animals, mend the fence, collect the eggs, and maybe sit down for a coffee in the afternoon and look at the pasture. I didn't want war, but if someone makes me choose between their peace and my freedom, you can prepare your ears. Because tomorrow, at 6 in the morning, the bell will ring again. Do you think I was annoying, or did I do the right thing? Leave your opinion in the comments.